Say welcome to this meeting of the Finance and Council Controlled Organisations Committee. I thought I'd better come back early from a holiday to keep Doug out of the chair, so I'm here. At this stage there's been no apologies, but if this meeting is still going at 10 to 2, Jim has to sneak away, so that's okay. Councillor O'Malley for early departure. Are you going with him? Okay, that's fine. There's been no other apologies, but I move those short notice ones. Seconded Councillor Wiley. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Thank you. Confirmation of agenda. I just move that Councillor Walker will second that. All those in favour? Aye. Anyone against? No, thank you. That's carried. Declarations of interest. Now, I did actually notice today when I was reading audit and risk papers that there was in the audit report there is occasions of councillors not having their registers up to date that have been found out by the Companies Office and that, so just remind you to keep those things up to date. But does anyone have any changes? Okay, well with that I confirm the proposed management plan for elected members. Got a seconder? Yep. Doug, thank you Doug. Any discussion? Right, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Thank you, that's carried. Now we've got the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 10th of August. That's item 5. Anyone got anything about that? I'd like to move that we confirm the minutes of the Finance and Council Controlled Organisation Committee held on the 10th of August as a true and correct record. Seconded Councillor Wiley. Any discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Anyone against? It's carried. Thank you. Now we come to the open actions of the finance. Item 6. There's only the one action, and that's the end of year financial result, but that will come to us later on. So I'm happy to move that we note the open actions from the resolutions of Finance and Council Controlled meeting. I have a seconder in Doug. Yep. Oh, yep. Thank you, Doug. Any discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you. Now item 7, the Finance and Council Controlled Organisations Committee, the Forward Work Programme. Happy to move. Any questions about it? No questions? Oh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question for Mr. Logie, I think, and the answer might be it's going to Council, but I know Council has asked for work to be done on how we fund the new curbside collection system and whether that's a targeted rate or if so, how that is structured. Will early thinking or options report back to this committee, or will it go straight to Council?
So that'll go to Council as part of the annual plan discussions.
Thanks, Gavin. No other questions, and Councillor Staines was willing to move, and a seconder in Councillor Geary. Any discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. And now we get to we've got Mr. Warren Allen, who's the chairperson of the Audit and Risk Committee, and he's in attendance and he's got a presentation for us. So welcome, Warren.
Thank you very much, Chair, Mayor and Councillors. It's a great pleasure to be with you this afternoon. This is the first time since I took over the role as Chair of the Audit and Risk Committee that I've been in front of the majority of councillors. So what I thought I'd do today was keep it sort of fairly general and explain what an Audit and Risk Committee or Audit and Risk Subcommittee in your terms is, and what it does, and where it can add value, and how you as councillors and council should use the Audit and Risk Committee. So I've got a brief presentation. There's only a few slides, and I've got 2 photos to start with. I don't have the good fortune of living in this city, but our 3 daughters did have the good fortune. All of them spent either 3 or 4 years here, so our family connection to the city is very fond and very strong. So I've got two photos here that were in the slide deck that I couldn't move away from, and I said to Wendy Collard when she sent it through, I said, wow, what a wonderful city. And this photo and this one were my favourites of what was available in the slide deck. So just to make sure we're in the right place, Finance and Council Controlled Organisations Committee, and as the Chair said, I'm Warren Allen, and it's my pleasure to chair your Audit and Risk Subcommittee. So what I thought we'd do is, why do you have an Audit and Risk Subcommittee? And as is normal with local government sector, you generally go to the Act first to sort of find out what the Act says about it. So if we go to our Act, which of course is the Local Government Act 2002, there was two sections in there that I thought were entirely appropriate. And the first one I'll read out is, a local authority should ensure prudent stewardship and the efficient and effective use of its resources in the interest of the district or the region. And the other one was, manage its revenues, expenses, assets and liabilities, investment and general financial dealings prudently and in the manner that promotes the current and future interests of the community. So really, in my opinion, an Audit and Risk Subcommittee is the ideal structure to help Council deliver under those two parts of the Local Government Act. What's interesting here in New Zealand is there's no direct legislative requirement to have an Audit and Risk Committee, which is different than in Australia. In Australia, under their Local Government Act 1995, there is a legislative requirement for every local authority to have an Audit and Risk Committee. But the general practice in New Zealand is that all local authorities do have an Audit and Risk Committee. And it's something that's been promoted very strongly by the Auditor General since 2006. The successive Auditor Generals have been on this case, and they see it as good practice, and generally I think in the New Zealand context it's seen as something that is good practice and is essential. Right, what I'd like to do now is just look at the sort of the general operating principles, and what I'm going to do is this is the theory, if you like, and then in the last two slides that I've got, I'm then going to sort of say, well, how do we do it here in Dunedin and match it against that theory? So the first thing to know is the Audit and Risk Subcommittee is independent from Council and management. And I need to make the point that that's not in terms of structure. Because it is a subcommittee of Council, it's not independent in terms of its structure. But in the way that they operate and the work that they do, to be effective, they need to be independent in the way that they operate. It brings a different and independent perspective on risks, issues, challenges that Council face. And generally, Audit and Risk Committee can spend more time on some of those risks and issues, discussing and debating them, than what Council may have available to it. This next one is really important, and one I feel very strongly about, is the purpose is to assist Council in discharging the responsibility. So the responsibility with those two sections of the LGA that I read out, and the Audit and Risk Committee can play a really key role in helping Council discharge that responsibility. Now, an appropriate Audit and Risk Subcommittee should be made up of both elected and non-elected members. And again, this is something that the Auditor General has pushed strongly for the past 15 years, so that you have a combination of elected and non-elected members. And the current best practice, and again something that over the last 2 or 3 years the current Auditor General has been very active in pushing, is to have an independent chair. So a non-elected member is in fact the chair. And I've had quite a bit of experience over my years in local government, and I do find that an Audit and Risk Committee with an independent chair is somewhat more effective and efficient than having the chair as an elected member. Should have open and effective relationships with the external and the internal auditors, together with all levels of management. The Audit and Risk Committee can't do its work if there's a relationship issue with the auditors or management. And this final point is, again, is one that I find myself making regularly. It's not a decision-making body per se. It's more in the advisory and supporting role to assist council to meet both legislative and community expectations. So it's important that council cannot delegate its responsibilities to a subcommittee. Certainly it can have the subcommittee do some of the legwork and seek its advice and its opinion, but at the end of the day, the council has a responsibility. And a really good example of that is the annual financial statements. It's something that Audit Risk Committee spends a lot of time looking at, working with management, working with the auditors, but at the end of the end, can advise council on, but at the end of the day, it's a council responsibility to issue that. So what are the key areas of attention? What are the things that we generally see on the agenda of a Audit and Risk Subcommittee? Financial reporting, and these are in no particular order, that just the way they sort of tumbled out of my mind. And having had 45 years as an auditor, financial reporting is sort of my breakfast, if you like. So financial reporting, risk management and systems of internal control that exist within council. And it's interesting to note that in the New Zealand context, significant agenda time is allocated to health and safety. And I somewhat flippantly at times saying that within the local government sector, health and safety is a sort of industry on its own. But I'm not wanting to sort of move away from the importance of that. It is a significant issue, and I'm sure you'll be comforted to know that it's a big agenda item on audit and risk subcommittees. Audit and risk subcommittees do deep dives into a range of key risks and control processes. So there will be some items on the agenda where more time is spent looking at, understanding, giving advice and debating. External audit and internal audit, as the name says, audit and risk subcommittees, so audit is important. And I deliberately put those down the list a little bit because sometimes I see an audit and risk committee being captured by the auditors. It's far too focused on audit and not anywhere near enough focus on risk. So the placing in the list of those two was deliberate. So there needs to be a very good balance between audit considerations and risk. There needs to be effective communication to full council and management, reviewing and commenting on council policies, reviewing policies, procedures, methods and external technologies, ensuring legislative compliance. A very difficult area for government and local government in today's context is ensuring that you comply with all bits of legislation, and this is where an audit and risk committee can be helpful. And importantly, being a subcommittee, it is a grouping of people on its own, so it needs to maintain and consider its own effectiveness. So every now and then, sort of once a year, once every 18 months, it needs to look and saying, is it doing the job? Certainly I see council having an important role in that you need to consider, is the Audit and Risk Committee doing its job appropriate? Last two slides, let's now look at sort of the operation for Dunedin City Council. How do we sort of operate compared to those norms? Well, the Audit and Risk Committee meets at least 5 times annually. It comprises the Mayor and 3 elected members and 2 non-elected members, both myself and Janet Copeland, who is a well-known legal practitioner here in Otago and Southland. So, you have the sort of the accounting and the legal expertise in the non-elected members on the Audit and Risk Committee. Interesting to note that Dunedin City Council, ahead of its time, for some years now has had an independent or a non-elected chair of its Audit and Risk Committee. You tick that best practice box. Interesting to have a look at the standard agenda items which we run on each of our agendas. Risk management, and dare I say it, a significant amount of the agenda is put over to health and safety reporting. And we're very fortunate, and Janet, many of you will know, her expertise is in HR, human resources. So, she plays a really important role in terms of health and safety and those employment aspects. Risk register updates, legal matters, external audit plans and the progress and the completion of external auditors. The Council's external auditors Audit New Zealand, which is the operation arm of the Auditor General. Internal audit work, the action plans and the work there, that is outsourced to a local firm called Crow New Zealand, and in my humble opinion they serve the council very well. Some of the work and some of the reports that they bring to the Audit and Risk Committee add a lot of value and worthwhile. We have updates from the holding company, DCHL. Treasury risk management is an important part, is on each one of our agendas. And also review of the protected disclosure register. Some of the specific items that we have, so these are items that don't necessarily appear on each agenda. As I said, we do deep dives. That was in the sort of the best practice. And to give you an example, we did one recently on cyber risk. A big issue in New Zealand, big issue all around the world. So we did a deep dive on cyber risk. Annual reporting, that's the financial statements, the performance reports and any accounting policy changes. Accounting policies is somewhat a technical term, but it's the way in which the accounting of council is undertaken. And there's always a lot of interest if you change that. One of the hallmarks of accounting is to be consistent. So, if you make a change to your policy, that needs to be properly understood and discussed and debated. So that's why that's there. We spent some time this year, earlier this year, on the long-term plan and the monitoring of audit findings, both external audit and also internal audit. The Audit and Risk Committee, in my opinion, and as I said, I'm relatively new as chair. I came in March of this year. That it has very effective working relationships with management, the external auditors and the internal auditors. Management respond. The council can be very pleased that management respond in a very timely and appropriate way to any suggestions, recommendations or requests for specific items on the agenda. So we have absolutely sort of no issues in that regard. And in my opinion, the elected councillors on this committee, and there's the mayor and 3 of them, as I said earlier, are active participants in the committee's work. They work diligently and they undertake their roles in the Audit and Risk Committee absolutely sort of appropriately. And my final point is, Council, you have a great resource here in an Audit and Risk Committee. It's important that the work that we do support the work that you do and the responsibilities that you have as councillors. So do use us. You know, if there's something at council that you feel is appropriate that the Audit and Risk Committee and its expertise and experience that sit around the Audit and Risk Committee table, we're there to be used. And we would sort of welcome the opportunity to help support you in the good work that you do. And I certainly look forward to reporting to you on not regular basis, but certainly at times when you feel that it's appropriate that you have a report from the Audit and Risk Committee. So thank you, Chair. That's all I was wanting to cover today, seeing this was my initial time in front of councillors, and I'm really happy to try and answer some questions.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that was a good report. And I will take some questions. I will actually start the ball just on your last point, but you had a slide that said that it was the role of the Audit and Risk Committee to have effective, this was your last speaking point, but you said about the effective communication to full council and management. And I guess what my question is more for council than management, because obviously the chief executive is on that committee too. But what would you think would be a minimum requirement in terms of communication back to full council? Because they see the minutes. If they read them or not, I'm not sure, but what would you see a minimum requirement?
Thank you, Chair. Good question. It's really over to you people, over to council. But to help you, one of the other councils where I chair the Audit and Risk Committee, I go once a year to the full council meeting. And it's at the time that they are considering their annual report and financial statements. And while I'm there to answer any questions or to explain the work that's undertaken in the Audit and Risk Committee, we also give a sort of a very brief undertaking of other work that we've done during the year. So I suppose my answer would be once a year should be enough, but it's entirely over to you. We are a subcommittee of council.
Thank you very much. Now I had a question from the Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Allen. I was surprised in the OAG's latest paper on observations on council or local government risk management that the point around independent chairs for audit committees wasn't made, or at all, really, let alone strongly. Was that a surprise to you also?
Thank you, Mayor. No, not a surprise, because what's interesting is that they've been very active in other sort of forums, you know, through their management letter, through their sort of annual report on the work that they do on the local government sector, in pushing that. And I'm not sure of the exact number, but the number of local authorities in New Zealand that do not have an independent chair now is very small. So if you went back 3 or 4 years, it would be the majority didn't have them. Way the majority now does have independent chairs. So you know, I think that they've achieved what they want to with that objective.
Yeah, thanks. And just the other thing I wanted to pick up on was the point you made around the committee not being, or the subcommittee in this case, not being a decision-making body per se, and that's certainly understandable in terms of the decisions that sit with council as a body. But of course, audit committees also are across internal policies of the organisation that wouldn't ever be expected to come to council or committees for debate and sign off. So I'm interested in where you see the role of the audit committee in the internal policy setting of the organisation.
Yeah, I still see it as an advisory and supporting committee, and those internal policies may well be the responsibility of management. And again, sort of management can use the Audit and Risk Subcommittee very much the same as council does, and to give sort of advice and support on those internal policies, and in things like internal control. And you sort of have expertise and experiences that sit on the Audit and Risk Committee that are available for management and council. But I don't see them as having any delegated authority to make decisions. But again, as a subcommittee, council, if they wish to do that, could do that.
Thank you. Councillor Vandevers.
Thank you very much for giving us your very clear view on what the Audit and Risk Committee is about. And I came onto council quite a long time ago with the probably layman's view that an auditor was someone who looked through all the accounts and made sure that no massive amounts of monies were going missing anywhere. I was a bit disappointed to discover that in the case of the city fleet frauds that actually probably triggered Audit and Risk Committee happening here, that years of consecutive audits failed to note millions in missing cars, and later on also failed to note contracts that were paid but the work not done, for instance. And it seems that normal audit doesn't pick these things up. Do you see your Audit and Risk Committee as possibly being able to pick some of those things up that audit, which turns out just to be a tick box process thing, doesn't do?
Through you, Chair. Councillor, worthwhile question. Difficult one to answer, and there's many parts to it. Audit is not a fail-safe system. It's not a fail-safe process. It's a human process, and all around the world we've read over the last sort of 10 or 20 years of sort of failures of audit, not picking up things such as sort of happened here in Dunedin. There's been a huge amount of focus in the audit industry around sort of audit quality and sort of focusing on how an audit is undertaken, so to eliminate or reduce the number of what we call audit failures. And you obviously alluding to an audit failure that sort of happened here. So it's difficult for me to say that our work would pick that up. But we work very closely. We ask informed questions of management and the audit process. We have to work together with both external and internal auditors, to make sure there is a sort of robust system, and that those audit failures, do not happen again. But there's no cast iron guarantee. It's assurance, not insurance.
I understand that. Regarding the city fleet frauds, I personally sent 300 emails over 3 years trying to find out what was going on there, and I sent them to management. Should I have also sent them to, or if it was to happen now, should I also send them to Audit and Risk, to you for instance, if there are questions, deep questions about things that aren't as they should be?
Chair, I should turn that back to you or to the Chief Executive who's sitting behind me, but speaking personally, I have no difficulty in receiving emails from any councillors, but I should turn that to the Chief Executive.
Well, I guess I'll try and answer both questions, and the answer is yes, but we do have a fraud officer, and so any I won't say any suspected fraud, any issues at all that anyone considers may be fraudulent should be reported to the fraud officer.
Rather than the audit and risk?
I'm happy for it to be either or. There's absolutely no problem with that. But the other thing I'd just like to add, and trying to partly answer your first question too, Councillor Van der Vissen, that is that the work that I've seen on the 6 years odd that I've been on this Audit and Risk Committee, I think there's been a significant number of processes and procedures put in place that I think it would be very unlikely that, for example, if someone was to try and commit the fraud with the cars again, that would not be so easy to go unnoticed within the
Agreed.
council. There is a far different environment internally about how they deal with all those things, and that is, as you say, directly related to this committee and possibly directly related to that fraud. But it was a wake up for everyone, and I'm pretty sure it won't happen again. So, yeah.
Right. And my final question is in terms of your advisory situation. Do you, for instance, model and risk and do risk assessment on modelling for instance, a significant increase in interest rates that we may encounter given that we have a group debt of over $1 billion? Do you forward advice in that area to our financial people, or does that not fall under your advisory role?
Through you, Chair, Councillor, we wouldn't do that work. You know, we're an advisory board. Management or the Treasury company would do that work, and that certainly would come through in the risk management work that's undertaken by management. So we have visibility over that. We would discuss it. We would bring our external experiences, Janet and I, to that discussion. But the responsibility of doing that work sits with management, and we're like an oversight body.
I recognise that, but I was wondering if, for instance, you look at our annual plan or our 10-year plan and we've budgeted for, say, 5% interest rates, but that you foresaw the possibility or even the probability of 10% interest rates coming along. And I'm remembering a time when I was paying 14 and 22 on second mortgage. Would you, given that you saw that possibility, would you red flag that in your role as Chair of Audit and Risk to Dunedin City Treasury, for instance?
Again, through you, Chair, not wanting to get into a specific answer on sort of interest rates, but if the members of Audit and Risk had a different view than what they were seeing that was being put up by management, we would certainly put that on the table and discuss that. So management would go away from the Audit and Risk Committee knowing that there perhaps was a different view on certain key aspects that existed in there. So,
and would that different view have a way of filtering through to us, or would it be simply between you advising management rather than advising councillors?
Again, through you, Chair, I'd need to turn to either Chief Executive or CFO for that. I think if it was significant, it would likely appear in the minutes, and the minutes, I understand, are available for council.
No, thank you very much. Thank you.
I guess the other response to that is that, Councillor, is it's this body, the council, that sets the budgets. We endorse the budgets when we go through our long-term process. So, yeah.
Yeah, but based on advice. And my
Absolutely.
question really was, does that advice only come from Treasury, or would it also come from Audit and Risk?
Yeah, and the answer to that is this count.
It's a related question.
Oh, yep.
Just in due course.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it simply is that we are the people that set the budgets. Yeah. Yes, you're right, it is done by management, and you wouldn't want the people around this table doing that based on what we all thought, so it has to be a collective decision. But yeah, just one other question I did, or not a question but comment. So in response to your earlier question, I said contact the fraud officer. I did fail to mention that he's sitting on my right, and it's Mr. Logie. So,
Just so we're clear, there is a fraud policy that's available, and obviously it does provide an escalation path. So obviously, if there was a suspect of the fraud officer committing fraud, then probably wouldn't want to tell me that you would escalate it. So, and the chair of the Audit and Risk Subcommittee is party to that escalation process, as is the chief executive.
I have a speaking list, but I'll go to you, Mayor, because you had a related question. So,
Yeah, thanks. And it's it's not so much a question of setting the budget as setting the significant assumptions that underpin the budget, and that is something that is signed off by council, but is equally something that goes through the Audit and Risk Committee and the external auditors for comment as part of that process. It's more than just staff advice that informs that.
yeah, and we do have a financial strategy that we agree to do. Yeah, that's right. Councillor Elder.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question related to the subject you debate a lot and discuss a lot about, and that is the health and wellbeing of the staff. And I was just wondering, could you clarify for me the role of auditor risk in responsibility for health and wellbeing, and also the council's role in that? Yes.
Yeah, I'm beginning to sound through you, Chair, like a cracked record. That is a responsibility that sits with council for health and safety and well-being of staff. But as I said, we do spend a lot of time. We get a huge amount of detailed reports. There's a lot of interest. And as chair, I'm very much aware of the percentage of our meetings that are sort of put over to health and safety and well-being. And as I say, Janet Copeland has a real strong interest. She has a professional interest in that side of things, and so there is a lot of advice and a lot of support for the processes undertaken by council, but the responsibility does sit with council.
And within those discussions over the past couple of years, has the mental health and wellbeing around COVID-19 been discussed?
I can only speak from March, but I can absolutely guarantee you that that's been a very big part of our focus. We have another meeting starting in just under half an hour, and it's going to be a big part of that meeting as well. So,
thank you for that.
Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for my lateness. I just had a question around what percentage would you say the work of the Audit and Risk Committee is around mitigation versus active dealings of, dealing with issues that are happening sort of right now?
Thank you, Councillor. Good question. I wouldn't want to put an accurate percentage on it, but when we do look at risk management, we look at both the identification of the risks and what are the steps in terms of controls and processes that are run by council and management to mitigate those risks. As I've said, a bit like with health and safety, because that is just one of the risks in a sort of whole suite of risks that council face. But the whole risk management technique and reporting is very sophisticated, and certainly the work and the advice from the Audit and Risk Committee covers identification and mitigation. And also the sort of the reporting. So.
Would you like to turn your mic on?
Sorry, my mic's not on. I'm just trying to read my shorthand now. So if council staff get advice on an issue from Audit and Risk, then they listen to that advice but then decide not to action it, does that leave us exposed legally?
I'm a humble accountant. I couldn't sort of comment on legally. I wouldn't think it does because, you know, it's an advisory board and it doesn't, you know, it doesn't have all the right answers. So, and, you know, there would be good grounds for that advice not being followed. So, you know, I'd be surprised if it exposed you legally. So.
And Councillor Barker. At this stage, you're the final question.
Just a couple of questions. Thank you, Chair. Just one around the effective communication to full council and management that you brought up, and we have access to the minutes, etc., that come up in the public part, but not to the private, the non-public bit. And it's not on a hub or anything like that. So I just wonder whether that would be usual in something like this. So we just see a very slim overview, I guess. Well, I've just had a look and I can't see it, so yeah. Okay. So my second question is around, I see there's an audit and risk subcommittee work plan that you'll be discussing in the meeting this afternoon, and it's got risk overview, and there's 7 risk overviews, including climate change, organisational security, strategic project management, asset management renewals, central government reforms, business continuity planning, including COVID, and financial risk, and 2 of them are ticked for the forward work program, and there's 5 that aren't. And I just wonder, will you be adding those into the work plan or just ticking off the work plan going forward?
When we consider risk management, we consider it sort of in a holistic way. And I'm not sure just exactly what you're referring to, but they may well be areas in which we're doing a deep dive that we're going to spend a little bit more time on but you know, we look at all the risk reporting that'll have those 7 risks and may well have many more, and that reporting will look at the mitigation that we've just talked about, how the systems and processes go to identify and mitigate those risks. So yeah, don't just think that that's the only ones that we look at, and I would think probably that's what we're going to sort of spend more time deep dive in. So.
Okay, thank you, because there's maybe 30 or 40 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'd just say that they are rolled over and ticks get put in the gaps as required. So yeah, definitely. That was your final question, Sophie? Yes. Yeah, Councillor Radich.
It may not be a question for you, but who decides who are the elected members on the Audit and Risk Committee? Can someone answer the question, please?
Council do,
Well-
Councillor.
Sorry?
Council do.
Council do. Thank you.
At this stage, it's the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor and the Chair of Finance and their Deputy. Is there any other questions? No? Well, if that's the case, Warren, thank you for coming and speaking to us today, and we'll expect to see you again maybe in a year's time or maybe before, but it might be when we're, like you say, cheapsies.
Thank you, Chair. It's an absolute pleasure, and as I say, please use us. You know, we're interested. We're there to assist you in your work. So, you know, any advice we get from you, we will look forward to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And on that note, I'd like to move that we note the Audit and Risk Subcommittee update, and I've got a seconder in Councillor Benson Pope, and I would just like to say, is there any discussion on that? Well, there again, I'd just like to say thank you very much. Appreciated that. And with that, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. And with that, I will close the meeting at 1:45. And
So, items for consideration.
sorry, items for consideration for the chair. I need to. Councillor Vandervis.
If you look at the video at the beginning of the meeting, I believe you spoke the words proposed management plan for elected councillors. Was that a Freudian slip, or if not, who do you think are managing the councillors?
Sorry, it might have been a slip. I might not have read my papers right.
All good.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Close
cutting
the
your
me-
holiday short and coming and seeing us.
Yeah. Thank you.
He referred to it as a holiday. I thought I wouldn't blow his gaff.